In this series, we start with the first game and we look at each game one by one, year by year. We will look at, amongst other things, the players, the venues, the history, footballing changes, and the quirky stories. I'm Steve. Join me on this journey to discover what makes England versus Scotland the greatest international derby. At this point, I just want to say a massive thank you to the various football fans and historians whose books, articles, blogs, and websites make this journey possible. There are too many to mention, but special thanks for Andy Mitchell's book First Elevens, The Birth of International Football. Also to Chris Goodwin and Glenn Isherwood's magnificent website, EnglishFootballOnline.com. It's a must for all stat-loving Englishmen. And it is to Glenn that I introduce a regular feature for this show, and that is your memories of England versus Scotland. Glenn tells me, quote, "The first one I can remember in detail was in 1971 in Wembley, when I was amazed that England's first goal didn't actually cross the line. It should have been a penalty instead. Not the first time that we'd benefited from such a decision. Then Scotland equalised when Alan Ball headed into his own net, and to this day, Hugh Curran is still credited with the goal on the Scottish FA website, although he clearly didn't touch it. If you want to share your memories, send me an email on England vs Scotland 1872 at gmail.com or join the Facebook or Twitter groups England v Scotland Football Journey. Links on the show notes. And so, like all football fans, my dreams were no different from every young footballer playing in the streets and the park growing up in the UK, and indeed all over the world. You just have to substitute the team you support and your nation. In my case, growing up in Glasgow in the late 70s and 80s, I had two football dreams. One was to pull on the hoops of Celtic, and the other to score Scotland's World Cup winning goal against England. Those dreams didn't become a reality, but it's frustrating to watch as Scotland have become over the years, cut me in half, and I'm as patriotic as they come. And England fans share that same patriotism. In the same time period, there was a lad kicking a ball about in Salford, dreaming of playing for United, wearing those three lions and lifting the World Cup as England's captain. As football fans, whatever our geographical differences, we're all cut from the same cloth. England and Scotland had fought wars with each other for hundreds of years, and when we stopped, we took a break, and then we started a different type of war, this time on the turf. The first FIFA recognised international game took place in 1872, and this undeclared war has lasted now for over 150 years, and boy, has it seen some battles. Where do we begin in this story? Football, as we know it, evolved slowly with ever-changing rules, and it's never stopped. With an introduction to VAR and 5 substitutes, football always continues to evolve. A form of football was documented by William Fitzstephen in 1170, who wrote about his trip to London. Quote, "After dinner, all the youths of the city go out to the fields for the popular game of ball." He goes on to say that each trade had their own team. Various types of ball games were played throughout the centuries, but football, as we would recognise it now, starts in the Victorian age. In 1857, amateurs Sheffield FC were founded and recognised by FIFA as the world's first club. As the first and only team, they had no one to play, so the club members played married men versus the bachelors. Sheffield FC also played under differing sets of rules called Sheffield rules. The distinction of the world's first professional team goes to Notts County, formed in 1862. This was followed the next year by the English Football Association, and as popularity grew, more and more teams across the country were being formed. With this, we start to see a slow evolution towards association football rules that will unify the different clubs all around the world. Between 1870 and 1872, arrangements had been made for representation matches between England and Scotland, and 5 games had been held in London. They aren't recognised as official games, as both teams weren't picked independently, rather by invite. Moreover, the majority of the players representing Scotland weren't actually Scottish. So, what was happening in the world of football in 1872? In England, we see Telford United and Kettering Town being formed. In Scotland, we see Rangers and Dumbarton formed. In the inaugural FA Cup, Wanderers beat Royal Engineers 1-0 at Kennington Oval, and they took cup back to Leytonstone in East London. On the international scene, in 1872, Charles Alcock, the FA General Secretary and England player, wrote a public letter in the Glasgow and Edinburgh newspapers offering a challenge for a team made up of Scots to face a team of 11 Englishmen. This challenge would ignite a spark, for Queen's Park Football Club decided to take Mr. Alcock up on his offer. Scotland, therefore, in 1872, their first international was represented in full by the amateur team Queen's Park, founded in 1867. They were, in the latter years of the 19th century, one of Scotland's most successful clubs, winning the Scottish Cup on 10 occasions, and indeed played in the inaugural FA Cup, drawing at the Kennington Oval with Wanderers in the semi-final. However, money and logistical problems of Queen's Park not yet having a ground scratched a return game up in Glasgow. Queen's Park also reached the English FA Cup final in 1884 and also 1885, being beaten both times in the final against Blackburn Rovers. Queen's Park would continue to compete in the FA Cup until 1887, when the Scottish Football Association banned its member clubs from competing. So, it was Robert Gardiner and David Wotherspoon of Queen's Park, whilst in London, for their Queen's Park FA Cup tie, and they stayed in the capital post-match to meet with the English FA and arrange the first international fixture. The match and the location were agreed between the FA and Queen's representative, with Wotherspoon writing a letter in the Scotsman confirming the news. Due to Edinburgh not yet being accustomed to Association Rules football code, both parties agreed Glasgow would be the best location for the tie. The match was to be played on St Andrew's Day, 30th of November 1872, at the West of Scotland cricket ground in Peel Street, Partick. Admission into the ground costing £1, and ladies were to be admitted free. Interestingly, having grown up in nearby Scotstoun, my granny lived in Peel Street. I used to watch some of the cricket games from the top of the crescent, overlooking the ground, albeit with a restricted view. As for the football strips, let us start with the home team. People always draw the conclusion that the reason the Scotland national team play in blue is because of the colour of the Scottish flag. However, the real tale is that the origin of the famous blue strip is from Queen's Park. The blue jersey was in fact their original strip before changing it to the black and white they play in now. Therefore, the Scotland team would play in blue. As to how the Lion Rampant badge was adopted as the Scotland badge is a unique story. David Wotherspoon, who was playing in the match, asked his sister to source out lion badges to be stitched onto the jerseys. And Marion Wotherspoon used her talented sewing skills to sew 11 lions to 11 blue shirts. The lions sewn were actually white rather than red. The red Lion Rampant would come later in 1882. The 11 thistles, each representing a player on the field, would later feature on the crest from the early 1950s. Unfortunately, no shirts remain from the Scotland team, just a partial crest. England would play in white, wearing a badge consisted of 3 lions within a shield in a similar stance to that of the English coat of arms, except that these lions were navy blue and the only distinguishable features were red eyes and mouths. A red and navy crown sat upon top of the shield. It is only from 1949 that the England emblem was introduced. The current England badge has 10 Tudor roses scattered around the 3 lions as they represent the 10 regional divisions, each of whom has a seat on the Football Association Council. The oldest football shirt in existence, an England shirt from the first game, is on display at the English National Football Museum. The match was well promoted, with tickets on sale and newspaper adverts in the days before the match, which pointed out that extra buses would go direct to the ground from the foot of Miller Street in Glasgow city centre. There were even fears that the ground would not be able to cope with the anticipated large crowd, and a letter to the Glasgow Herald suggested that admission should be by ticket only. An anxious response on the day of the game pointed out how unfair this would be. I do not know the committee of the management, nor anyone who has tickets to dispose of, and it would be too bad if I had my journey to Partick for nothing. In the event, the crowd behaved impeccably. The ground was roped and staked, and though here and there the stakes were not equal to the strain upon them, the onlookers kept perfect order, and never once trenched upon this field of play. Indeed, we have never seen a match where order was so well observed, with so little appearance of keeping it. And as for the organiser of the first international, unfortunately for Charles Aldcock, he was not playing, having injured himself 2 weeks prior to the game, but would instead act as umpire for the game. Kick-off was about 15 minutes later than the advertised time of 2 p.m, after the two teams made final preparations on the pitch, as observed by William Ralston in the Graphic, a weekly pictorial. His series of 9 drawings capture beautifully the mood of the event, including the English players warming up while smoking pipes or cheroots, the charging, the shoving that was all part of the game, and the top-hatted crowd straining the ropes. Ralston's drawings are the only images of the match. A photographer had been commissioned, but sadly he packed up and left when the Scotland players refused to commit to purchasing his prints. There were marked physical discrepancies between the teams, as the Glasgow Herald observed. The Englishmen had all the advantage of weight, their average being about 2 stones heavier than the Scotsmen, and they also had the advantage in pace. The strong point for the Scotland team was that they played extremely well together. This allusion to the combination play of the Scots highlighted the differing playing styles, with Queen's Park promoting a passing game that was alien to the English, who'd been brought up on a diet of individual dribbling and backing up, which required a strong physical presence. Scotland wore dark blue shirts, white knickerbockers with blue and white striped socks and red head cowls. And Scotland lined up in what would make modern watchers scratch their head with a 2-2-6 formation. England wore white shirts, with England arms embroidered on their left breast and the white flannel trousers or knickerbockers, and they played an even more extraordinary 1-2-7 formation. The teams lined up thus. Scotland. Robert Gardner, 25 years old. He's the goalkeeper, but switches places with Robert Smith at half-time. He's the forward. William Kerr, 20 years old. He's a back. Joseph Taylor, 21 years old. He's the other back. James J. Thompson, 20 years old, a half-back. James Smith, 28 years old, the other half-back. Robert Smith, 24 years old, the forward, who then goes in goal at half-time. Robert Leckie, 26 years old, the forward. Alexander Rind, 23 years old, the forward. William N. McKinnon, 20 years old, forward. James B. Weir, 21 years old, forward. David Wotherspoon, 23 years old, forward. All players, Queen's Park. England lined up like this. Robert Barker, 25 years old, goalkeeper, and switches to left at half-time. He plays for Hertfordshire Rangers FC and Wanderers FC. E. Harward Greenlaw, 23 years old. He's the three-quarterback. He plays for Notts County FC. Reginald C. Welsh, 21 years old. He's the half-back. He plays for Wanderers FC and Harold Checkers FC. Frederick Chappell, 23 years old, is the fly kick. Oxford University. W. John Maynard, 19 years old, the youngest player. He plays left, and then he goes in goals for the second half, and he represents the First Surrey Rifles FC. John Brockman, 24 years old, plays on the right, Cambridge University. J. Charles Clegg, 22 years old, he plays in the middle, Wednesday FC. Arnold K. Smith, 22 years old, middle, Oxford University. Cuthbert J. Ottaway, 22 years old, middle, Oxford University. Charles J. Jennery, plays in the middle, Crystal Palace. Charles J. Morris, 22 years old, left, Barnes FC and Harold Checkers. The match report from the Scotsman, Monday the 2nd of December, 1872, reads as follows. This match came off on the West of Scotland ground, Glasgow, on Saturday, in the presence of the largest seen any football match in Scotland, there being close on 4,000 spectators, including a good number of ladies. For the first time since its inauguration, has the match really earned itself the title of international, both teams being bona fide players in each country, and the wisdom of the committee of the association in deciding to play the match in Scotland was shown to great success, judged either by the play or the attendance. The day was dull, though dry, but the rain the previous night had made the ground somewhat soft. The English team, even with the changes made in it, was very strong, the 11 comprising representatives from 9 of the crack clubs of England. Their play was all through, especially forward, very much admired. Ottaway, the English captain, standing conspicuous and astonishing the spectators by some of the very pretty dribbling. During the first half of the game, the English team did not work so well together, but in the second half they left nothing to be desired in this respect. The Scots team, on the other hand, though not compromising with so many brilliant players, worked from first to last together, thoroughly knowing each other's play. The match, after an hour and a half's play, ended in a draw, Scotland having the best of it in the first half of the game, and England in the second. Scotland, having won the toss, chose the upper goal. England, having the disadvantage of fighting up the Bray during the first half of the game. The English captain led off with a good kick, but it was quickly sent back to one of the Scots halfbacks, and after some skirmishing on the part of the forwards, the English captain distinguished it by a beautiful piece of dribbling till he'd got within 15 yards of the Scotland's goal line, finishing with a good kick, which sent the ball over. The Scots now came away with a great rush, Leckie and others dribbling the ball so smartly that the English line were closely besieged, and the ball was soon behind. The Scots' play at this part elicited loud cheers, but not daunted, the English team came away in magnificent style and were soon in the very heart of the Scots' territory. When one of the Scots team kicked the ball behind his own goal line, it gave the English the advantage of punting the ball out, but no benefit resulted therefrom. Weir now had a splendid run for Scotland into the heart of the opponent's territory, but the English captain followed this up with a still finer piece of play. The manner in which he dribbled the ball past nearly all of his opponents being unique and brought forth a ringing cheer. Ryan and Weir then turned the tables for Scotland by a piece of excellent play and passed all the English forwards until Welsh stopped their career. England made another gallant attempt on the Scotland lines and were twice splendidly repulsed by the capital backplay. In turn, Scotland twice made splendid rushes, Weir and Ryan showing conspicuously in front. English territory was again cleared until Weir and Leckie once more put their goal in danger, passing all the English forwards. Greenhall, however, came to the rescue, and after charging first one, then the other of his opponents, piloted the ball splendidly out of play. Scotland immediately again bore down on the opposition's goal, and through a misunderstanding on the part of the English captain and Greenhall, Weir, amid great excitement, got past both of them, but with great speed of the English captain, enabled him to retrieve the threatened disaster and put the ball out of danger. The narrow escape had a wonderful effect on the English team, who again, to a man, came away, and Scotland's goal getting endangered for a time. But, as to show what it could do, the Scotland team made a grand effort, came away right into the heart of the English ground. So certain did success appear at this time that the greatest excitement prevailed. A good kick from Leckie, causing tremendous cheering from all parts of the crowd, so satisfied with the majority that a goal had been won for Scotland. But to the great chagrin of the Scots, it was however given no goal, the ball passing hardly an inch above the tape. Time was now called, and ends reversed. Both sides now redoubled their energies for the final struggle, the Scots fighting with indomitable pluck against the immense forward strength of their opponents. The game went England's way, but Scotland held out, and then the final whistle signalled the end of the first international as a draw. At the conclusion of the game, 3 hearty cheers were given to the England team, a compliment they returned to the Scotland team. And in the evening, the Englishmen were entertained to dinner at Carrick's Royal Hotel. The West of Scotland cricket ground were to be offered £10 for the match, and in case the gross drawings exceeded £45, of the tickets sold for the game, only one is left in existence, and this is to be found in the Scotland Football Museum at Hampden. The game financially proved to be an enormous success, as the takings amounted to £102 and the expenditure £69, leaving balance of £33. Not bad, as the start of the season Queen's Park had about £8 in the bank, so it wasn't a bad day's work. It was decided that the balance should be set aside as an international fund. £32 of it was used to send the Queen's Park players to London to play the return international there on the 8th of March, 1873. And it is to that game that will feature episode 2 of England v Scotland, A Football Journey. And such was the growing momentum for the game in Scotland that in 1873 the Scottish Football Association was formed. If you've enjoyed this episode, please click like, subscribe to get notifications when the next episode is released. Moreover, if you want to help support the show, you can do this via Patreon, the site that helps creators to continue providing quality material. The link for the show is to be found in the show notes, and some extra money for a few beers each month would be very much appreciated and help drown the sorrows of not having seen Scotland in the World Cup since 1998. I've been Steve, and until the next episode and England's first home game, bye bye.